Good afternoon, friends. You are most welcome to Civil Affairs channel. Today we are going to discuss Social Anthropology by MAAN IGNOU, MANE003, Comparative Ethnography, and our topic is Feminist Theories and Feminist Politics. Contents are Introduction, Liberal Feminism, Radical Feminism, Socialist Marxist Feminism, Multicultural Feminism, Gender Resistance Feminism, Social Construction Feminism, Postmodern Feminism, Summary. Learning objectives are after going through this unit, you will be able to understand the historical importance of merging the discipline of anthropology with feminism, dismantle long standing suspicion between these two domains and probe the importance and possibility of embedding them together, and comprehend that this is done by knowing different schools of feminist thought and how and where they can be neatly collaborated with the discipline of anthropology. Introduction part. The relationship between anthropology and feminism is somewhat uncertain and problematic. This is because of an endocentric bias that exists within the discipline of anthropology. However, famous feminist anthropologists like Henrietta Murray 1994 argued that the problem with anthropology is not its bias towards women but with its interpretation, placing them in the whole research and understanding them. It explains that the unease that exists between feminism and this particular discipline can be solved by placing women at the center of research. This understanding has led to the formulation of several feminist anthropological researches from 1970s onwards. It is in this context that it is important to understand different feminist theories and its broad politics. However, it is important for an anthropologist student to remember at least a few broad predicaments that come up while studying feminist theories. Anthropology postulates that gender operation is not universal. This is because the conception of women is also not universal and hardly stands any generalizations. Anthropology basically focuses its research on non Western traditions, whereas most of the mainstream feminist theories emanate from Western societies. Thus, there is always a potential risk of Eurocentric existing in both the disciplines. The risk comes from the colonial legacy of anthropology, which was, after all, a historical offshoot of colonial expansion. It also exists in feminist theory due to their origin in the West. Feminist anthropologists do claim that they aim at removing this systematic and epi- epistemological gap that exists between these two schools, but the feasibility and practicability of grafting Western specific feminist assumptions on the body of the local anthropological cultures is also severely contested. It is therefore important to understand the historical development of feminist theory and its broad politics. Liberal feminism. This is also called first wave of feminism, which basically was founded and propagated in the West. This school of thought emphasizes on equal rights in the realm of education, jobs, law, and so on. Their ideology is basically liberal individualism. They argue that women are capable of performing like men if they are given equal opportunities. They resist any kind of interference, either it is from the state of society. They are also called classical liberal feminist or equity feminist. They see law as a crucial instrument in both hampering and improving the role of women. Therefore, they hold that feminism's political role is to bring an end to laws that limit women's liberty in particular. Interestingly, they are also against any special privileges for women. Cultural libertarian feminists in this school of thought do recognize patriarchy as a main source of oppression in societies like USA, but they mainly conceive of freedom as personal autonomy. They argue that states should cooperate to enhance conditions that allow women to exercise her autonomy. Mary Wollstonecraft, 1759 to 1797, John Stuart Mill, Betty Friedan, etc. belong to this school of thought. Wollstonecraft, in her book A Vindication of the Rights of Women, 1833, argued that women should strive to have a personhood of her own because she possesses equal intellectual and rational capacity. This school is mainly criticized for being moderate, uncritical, and shallow, for it fails to offer any comprehensive analysis of women's oppression. Radical feminism. This school locates women's oppression in the locus of biology or sex and gender. Sex being the physical attributes differentiating men and women, gender is entirely gender is entirely a social construct made for the benefit of patriarchy. They see women's operation as the major violence happening in the society. Since they see biology as operation, they discourse marriage, reproduction, heterosexuality, and so on. Shulamit Firestone, Suzanne Brown Miller, etc., belong to this school. Some of them, for instance, Suleiman Firestone, 2003, or we can say 1970, simply paraphrase Marxist analysis of class by replacing it with the sex. Some of the early generation radical feminists argue that sex is basically violence, therefore, any form of sex ranging from intercourse to rape is perceived as a form of violence by them. They argue that men are biologically equipped to rape and women to be violated. The other main area that they register in biology is the process and activity of reproduction. They argue that a new radical reproductive technology ought to be developed so that even men will be able to conceive and reproduce children. Until and unless this becomes feasible, they claim that women should shun having sexual relations with men and stick to lesbian and other non-reproductive, non-heterosexual sexual activities. They see patriarchy as a trans-historical phenomena and an oldest form of oppression. They locate the root cause of women's oppression in patriarchal gender relations as opposed to legal systems, as in liberal feminism, or class conflict as in socialist feminism and Marxist feminism. Therefore, they seek to abolish patriarchy. Early radical feminists posited that the root cause of all other inequalities is the oppression of women. Later generations of radical feminists acknowledge the simultaneous and intersecting effect of other independent categories of oppression as well. These other categories of oppression may include oppression based on gender identity, race, and social class, and so on. However, this school is condemned for its biological reductionism and parochialism. Socialist Marxist feminism. This school believes that gender division of labor is the root cause of women's inequality. The fact that men have historically been having control over means of production, capital, terms of market, etc., is the main factor for oppression against women. Women, on the other hand, have been historically relegated to domestic labor like household work, reproduction, raising children, etc. Domestic labor do not have exchange value like the productive labor. This school argues that gender oppression is always associated with class oppression. Removal of class inequalities, correcting economic relations would automatically lead to the emancipation of women. They focus upon both the public and private spheres of a woman's life and argue that liberation can only be achieved by working to end both the economic and cultural sources of women's oppression. It makes use of both Marxist ideology of class oppression and radical feminist ideology of gender oppression in their theorization. Further, socialist feminists see women's liberation as a necessary part of larger quest for social, economic, and political emancipation. Marxist feminism believes that women's liberation is feasible only with the replacement of classless society, capitalism with classless societies. Marxist feminism's foundation is laid by Engels in his analysis of gender operation in his seminal work, The Origins of the Family, Private Property and the State, 1972 or 1884. He argues that women's subordination is not a result of her biological disposition, but of the economic mode of production that prevails in a particular society. Women's subordination to man is because the source and mode of production are under the control of man historically. He hypothetically studies history from this point of view and concludes that women's liberation is possible only of with the change in economic mode of production and production relations. Unlike socialist feminism, Marxist feminism pays less attention to social and cultural aspects of gender oppression. Clara Zetkin and Eleanor Marx were some of the prominent intellectuals in the school of thought. In this school of thought, there is severe criticism against both Marxist, socialist, feminist school of thoughts. Gail Rubin is one of the is one of those who reacted strongly to this school of thought. She wrote extensively on subjects including sadomasochism, sadomasochism, prostitution, pornography, and lesbian literature, as well as anthropological studies and histories of sexual subcultures and so on. In her essay, The Traffic in Women, Notes on the Political Economy of Sex, she coins the phrase sex gender system and criticizes Marxism for what she claims is its incomplete analysis of sexism under capitalism without dismissing or dismantling Marxist fundamentals in this process. Radical feminism, which emerged in the 1970s, also took issues with Marxist feminism. Radical feminist theorists stated that modern society and its constructs, law, religion, politics, art, etc., are the product of males and therefore have a patriarchal character. According to those who subscribe to this view, the best solution for women's oppression would be to treat patriarchy not as a subset of capitalism but as a problem in its own right. Thus, elimination of women's oppression implies elimination of male dominance in all its forms. Multicultural feminism. This school was founded and promoted by non white women like African American, Latina, Native American, Asian women, etc. They see and resist white racist solipsism in white mainstream feminist theory and politics. They find white feminist theories not only inadequate but prejudiced to acknowledge and address non white women's issues. They argue for multiple schools of thoughts like feminism, etc. Bell Hooks, Elizabeth Spellman, Patricia Hill Collins are prominent multicultural feminists. Main emphasis of this school of feminism is to focus on the intersectionality of oppression. Gender is not a sole cause of oppression but only one of the causes. Some women argued that it is not even a major cause of oppression. They put colored, non white women's oppression in a broad context of slave trade, colonialism, capitalist monopoly, imperialism, and so on. Women's oppression is contingent upon the other socio-economic context like where she comes from, her race, class position, and so on. Thus, it is not possible to have neither a monolithic theory nor agenda for liberation. Therefore, they strongly argue for group differentiated rights. It has been used as an umbrella term to characterize the moral and political claims of a wide range of disadvantaged groups, including African American women, gays and lesbians, and the disabled, immigrants, and so on. This school is closely associated with identity politics, the politics of difference, and the politics of recognition. They all refer they all refer to reevaluating historically disrespected identities and changing dominant patterns of representation by giving them agency all over the world. It also deals with economic imbalances and other social systems apart from the entity of culture. However, they do give overt emphasis to culture. Due to their overemphasis on culture, they are often clubbed with postmodern and post-structuralist feminist school of thoughts as well. Apart from the African American feminist, women from immigrant communities do embrace this stream of thought. They emphasize on the role of language and religion. Black feminism and multicultural feminism are distinct but related ideas. The former highlights victimization and resistance, whereas the latter highlights cultural life, cultural expression, achievements, and the like. Their claims for recognition are demands not just for recognition of aspect of group's actual culture, but also for the history of group subordination and its concomitant experience. This school is challenged for giving more emphasis to culture and neglecting other important factors like politics, economics, and so on. Gender resistance feminism. The radical lesbian standpoint, psychoanalytic feminists argue that gender inequality cannot be made equal through gender balance because gender dominance is so ingrained in the system. This school holds that formal legal rights alone would not curb gender inequality because it is structured. They study gender order from the feminist perspective and expose the hidden hierarchies among institutions, daily practices that allow men to control women's life. They call this dominance patriarchy and attribute all oppression against women to this structure. Politically, they argue that it is not enough to acquire gender balance or gender mainstreaming. Hence, they developed an important theoretical insight, which is the power of gender ideology. Gender ideology is nothing but the body of values and beliefs that constitute and support gendered social order. They argue that gender inequality has been established and sustained by major world religions that argue man's dominance is nothing but a reflection of God's will. They argue that sciences also subscribe to it by saying that gender operation is a result of genetic or hormonal differences. Legal system denies full citizenship to women. Mass media, sports, pornography, etc. encourages male power and objectification of women. According to them, men exploit women in all aspects. Women's intellectual and cultural expressions are repressed due to phallocentric nature of society. It focuses on how men and women are different socially, cognitively, emotionally, and so on. They explain that women should form separate women centered communities, institutions, and so on. Gender resistance feminism wants women's voices and perspective to reshape and gendered social order to reshape the gender social order. They confront the existing gender structure by turning it upside down. They value women and womanly attributes over men and manly attributes, emotional sensitivity over objectivity, nurturance over aggression, parenting over competition, and so on. Radical feminism, in particular, is against men's sexuality and sexual violence. This school tends to be confrontational in challenging the confines of male dominance. They resist by putting women first. They argue that women should create their own spheres in politics, culture, religion, education, and so on, while the systematic violence against women demands continued political engagement with the larger society. Women only spaces are needed for refugee, recreation, religious worship, cultural production, and so on. They stress the importance of countering the negative evaluation of women by valorizing their characteristics, mothering capacities, by encouraging pride in women's bodies, and by teaching women how to protect themselves against sexual violence. Their focus on standpoint is major theoretical contribution. Standpoint is a worldview from where one is located or situated in the society. Women's voice, women's voices and experiences are the sources for standpoint theory. They do insist on women's centric perception and politics as well. This school resonate to some extent the extremism of radical feminism. Thus, this school is also criticized for being partial to women. Social construction feminism. This school of feminism argues that gender is a biological fact with social implications. The social group women is the creation of masculine gaze. John Berger succinctly puts men look at women, women watch themselves being looked at. They are socially constructed through culture, theory, laws, media, day to day routines of a given society, and so on. Prominent theorist Dorothy Smith draws heavily on social construction theory and argues that sociological theory as constructed by men give a distorted picture of women's experiences, and that any theory which ignores the perspective of women is necessarily incomplete. There is upcoming research on women and popular media. They argued that even the way we watch media is split into two broad categories between active or male and passive or female. Women are generally displayed as object of pleasure, and their appearance is meant to serve strong visual and erotic male desires. The kind of labor that women put into media is also divided according to these sexual demarcations. This heterosexual division of labor controls the narrative structure, making and projection of entire media domain. Man is always the spectator and women always assumes the role of exhibition. In this way, it is the male fantasy and necessity that controls the mass media. Consequently, women always continue to watch and survey themselves constantly. She is both the watcher and watched at. She has to watch everything she embodies and everything she does. This way of thinking is implanted by man throughout history with aid of several institutions, principles and processes. Thus every woman carries a surveyor in herself, and that surveyor is a man. This school also argues that sexual difference is a social construction. Women are expected to master the art of femininity and achieve feminine body. She suffers continuously to keep herself presentable to the male eyes. In the contemporary patriarchal world, the needs and fantasies of man do dwell in the consciousness and common sense of the most women. Her own understanding and her own needs and desires are constituted and configured by what men expected of her. Thus, several subtle forces of social control operate on women. Women do respond to nonverbal cues as much as they do to verbal ones. They set the environment in which the power relationship of the sexes are acted out, and the ordained status of each sex is reinforced. These statuses inequalities are communicated in interpersonal behavior and social relationship of day-to-day lives. This school sees women only as victims of social construction and is totally oblivious to women's own contribution directly or indirectly to these construction. It is somewhat unreal to assume that all social constructions are anti-women or that all of them are basically produced by men. Postmodern feminism. This school includes both postmodern and post-structuralist theory. Postmodernism, built by Michael Foucault, Simon de Beauvoir, Derrida, Judith Butler, Helene Sixtus, Lucy Irigaray, and Julia Kristeva, can be termed as the prominent postmodern feminist. This school believes that sex and gender are mere construction of language. Judith Butler, in her book Gender Trouble 1990, For instance, criticizes the distinction drawn by previous feminism between biological sex and gender social construction, which is irrelevant to understand the realities of gender operation. Apart from their emphasis on language, they also believe in extreme relativism, diversity, and resist any sort of essentialism. They contest that there is anything like truth. For them, truth is absolutely relative. They thus tend to deconstruct the very notion of truth. Lucy Irigaray is a psychoanalyst whose primary focus is to liberate women from men's philosophies, including the ones of Derrida and Lacan, on which she is building. Irigaray takes on Freudian and Lacanian conceptions of child development to criticize the notion of Oedipus complex. She proposes three strategies for women to retain her individual identity, and they include create a gender neutral language, engage in lesbian and autoerotic practice, and mimic the caricatures men have imposed on women. But the modern history and epistemology always revolves around a settled notion of truth, and the very meaning of modernity and its associated structures do emanate from this faith and foundation. In this settled area of idea of truth, since this school fails to offer any single explanation or solution for women's problems, it is criticized for not offering any path of action and practical politics. Our last heading is the summary. At the last, we will discuss summary. Let us begin this. The present unit tried to focus on the relation between anthropology and feminist school of thought. It is basically an attempt to dismantle our dominant assumption that anthropology is basically male and Eurocentric and thus incapable of addressing and accommodating the reality of diversity in it. However, this was the assumption that was broken free with the advent of postmodern and post-structural feminist theories, which both tend and which both lend and borrow from anthropology both in terms of theory and politics. Thus, it is now time to explore more innovative themes and ways of doing feminism in anthropology as well as in anthropological feminism. Moreover, several ethnography oriented studies begin to propose the primacy of understanding each and every culture, whether the study is conducted by feminist or anthropologist in its own terms and context. This, in way, not only erodes ethnocentric and Eurocentric biases from both of these disciplines, but also opens up large areas and aspects for common research. The other purpose that the unit tries to serve is to trace the historical trajectory of different schools of feminist thought along with their limitations. This helps us to understand how the politics and discourse of feminism has been evolving. Such a study of evolution does ensure that feminism is not a narrow discipline but does carry lots of potential to transform itself according to changing times and histories. The same is the case with the domain of anthropology. Therefore, it will be helpful for a student of anthropology and feminism as well to understand and reflect upon the contents, developments, and possible confluences of these two disciplines. Thank you very much.